I've never used a pre-emerge wheat herbicide. Why should I use something pre-emerge in my wheat?
Research studies have shown that most people after the age of 30 or 35 don't like to try new things. Now, I don't understand that, Brian. Why would you not want to try new things? You get kind of comfortable, you get in a rut of this is how things are done, there's nothing else better out there, I've got it all figured out. Well, guess what? There are some things that are better, and there are technologies that are changing all the time. One of those is pre-emerge herbicides for wheat. We've never had these options before. Now we've got some choices to control even tough things like cheatgrass before we plant our wheat.
Yep, so we're going to talk today about 3 newer products that are available on the market. Sure, there were some old products that could be used, but quite honestly, they weren't that great. So we've got 3 very good choices that you can now use ahead of wheat that are relatively inexpensive. And the most important thing, and here's why you want to use this pre-emerge wheat herbicide, is it's going to thin out your weed populations so they're much easier to control in crop. Pre-emerge, we can do a lot of things, but once you get in crop, that crop is pretty sensitive, and especially when we've got a grass crop like wheat and we're trying to control grasses like cheatgrass, downy brome, other bromes, really wild oats, any other grasses. To take a grass out of a grass is not the easiest thing in the world, but you can start with a good pre-emerge herbicide.
Okay, well, you talk about the grass weeds. Let's talk about the broadleaf weeds just a little bit too, because you know, broadleaf weeds, depending on where you're at, what crop rotation you're coming out of, broadleaf weeds may be a big issue for you too. Now, it could be something where you just need to have a good burn down when you're going to start planting. And if you want a burn down that's quick, there aren't too many things quicker than this new Sharpen product that's out there.
Yep, so you've probably heard of Kicksor advertised. Well, the straight Kicksor product is called Sharpen.
Probably heard of it. It was on over 10 million acres this year. I'd say a lot of our viewers have heard quite a bit about Sharpen, Brian.
Well, maybe not if they were a wheat farmer, but you can use this Sharpen in corn, soybeans, or wheat, or a variety of other crops. Well, anyway, with the Sharpen, it does give a good burn down, and you can throw an ounce or 2 per acre with your Roundup before your wheat emerges. That is a very good choice, and it will burn everything down quickly. If you have Roundup resistant weeds, or let's say you don't want to spray 2,4-D because you're worried about drift and you're worried about crop injury, you know, this Sharpen presents a nice choice. An ounce would cost you roughly $4 an acre, so it's not that expensive.
Okay, well, let's talk about that now, because we had a little debate here before we started filming that, well, wow, Roundup's pretty cheap. We could just throw more Roundup in and do the same thing. Well, no, you can't.
Well,
because
you
I'll
might
tell
be
you
able
a couple
to.
of things. You hit one of them, Roundup resistant weeds. Now I've got another mode of action out there. These weeds that are resistant to Roundup are not resistant to Sharpen. So Sharpen does a nice job. You won't take a chance that you may have to come back again with a second application because you missed some weeds. The other thing is the speed of activity. This Sharpen is fast. And if you say, wow, I didn't realize what a disaster I've got, now my field is loaded with green weeds and I need to be planting winter wheat, put the Sharpen out there and in just a few days, it really does a nice job depending on the rate you're using.
Now we've talked on earlier shows about the green bridge. Preferably, we'd like to have everything dead out in that field for a couple of weeks prior to seeding. So if you're going to be seeding in a couple of weeks, you need to get everything done today. You need to get it controlled right now so we have fewer diseases and insects in this coming crop.
So you've either got Gramoxone with no residual, or you've got Sharpen that also has a short window of residual they could mix with the Roundup.
Or you could throw in Valor. So you could throw in Valor preferably a month in advance.
Well, that's how the label reads.
Yeah.
You've got to get the Valor out there early. Now, I know there are guys that have experimented, and there's universities that are doing trials experimenting that, you know, hey, they just haven't done the research on this. Maybe the window is really only a couple of weeks that you need to put Valor out in front of wheat. Well, we've got to go with what that label says. So there may be some label changes even here before you see our show, but do check the label before you spray something. Now with Valor, it does have some pretty good residual on broadleaves. We used a lot of Valor on our own farm, especially in our soybeans. It's been a great residual product. But you do need to put it out a little bit in advance because they just haven't done all the testing yet.
Okay, so the product that will be the most popular for wheat pre-emerge is called Prepare, and it's the exact same thing as Everest. It is an ALS herbicide, so it's not going to control ALS-resistant weeds, but what it does have good activity on is the brome species, wild oats, a variety of different grasses besides broadleaves, so we get good activity on a lot of different things. Now, it's not going to be 100% control, but at least you've got decent activity, so post-emerge you don't have everything out there and you don't have a complete disaster. The labeled rate is 0.3 ounces. Most farmers though are using 0.2 ounces just so it's a little less expensive. 0.2 is only going to cost you $5. It's still going to give you decent activity, and then you have fewer issues when it comes to overlaps, going on the end rows, everything else in terms of crop injury. It's 0.2 ounces. Most farmers feel that is very, very safe, and it still has good activity. And again, it comes in that $5 range, so it's not very much money that we're talking. It could be mixed in with Roundup. It can be sprayed after seeding, before the crop emerges. If you wanted to spray straight prepare, you know, honestly, it's the same thing as Everest. So what would happen if the wheat starts to emerge? I mean, nothing. You're not going to have any adverse effect on the wheat. Again, we'd like to get it on pre-emerge, but worst case scenario, if a little bit of wheat started to come up, it should be just fine.
Well, I think the big thing though is you have to keep in mind what this product is going to do. It's not going to lights out clean your field up for the whole year. We're talking about suppression. We're talking about getting a good start, wiping out a lot of those weeds before they're up.
80, maybe even 90% of the weeds, that's a big help.
It is. You get a thicker stand of wheat. Now you're going to be a lot more successful in surviving the winter, and also when it comes to springtime and you've got a few blades of grass coming back through, now you can go out and kill them a lot easier with your spring application.
Yeah, well, if you've never used a pre-emerge herbicide, we would certainly encourage you to do that. At least do some half fields or some strips or something like that so you can see the difference yourself on your farm if you don't believe a word that we're telling you. But all we can say is if you're a wheat farmer, using a pre-emerge herbicide definitely helps your weed control and should help your yield in most cases.
Now, some of the products we talked about here will help control our weed of the week. We'll show you what other ones will coming up next.